Hi, I'm Dr. Tracy Latz. I'm an integrative psychiatrist, but I do so much more. We are having a great conversation about how do you connect with something that is more than you? How do you step into your gifts and get out of the fear and the way that we stop ourselves and feel joy in your life? We're about to talk about that and give you the answers. Join in.
Welcome to the show. I'm so glad you're here. You're going to be so glad you're here. I'm Kim Sorrelle. I'm an author, speaker. I get to do a lot of fun things in life, but my favorite thing to do is meet people. And I get to meet some of the most incredible people ever. Today is my new friend, Tracy, who is a doctor. She's actually got 150 degrees, I think. I mean, if I named them all, it would take the entire episode.
Yeah.
She's done so much, and she does so much. And what I love about her is her heart, because everything she does is to serve other people and to help other people. You're going to learn some very interesting things today. And so stick around and listen to the whole thing. And even the beginning of this is going to be very interesting because we're going to talk about Tracy and her life. Tracy, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Kim. I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you're here. Normally I start out asking people what 8 years old was like for them, 8-year-old Tracy, but you had a pretty significant 5-year-old Tracy. So maybe we should start there.
Oh my goodness. Let's see. 5-year-old Tracy was already a bit intuitive. I was very quiet. My father said later on his deathbed, actually, he told me he always thought he was worried about me because I was always so quiet. I didn't speak a lot. He thought I was autistic, he thought. And Anyway, at age 5, I was playing with my older brother, who was about a year and a half older than I was, and we were playing next to an area we call the mill pond. And we were pretending that we had a stick with some Spanish moss hanging off the end, and we were leaning over, dipping the Spanish moss into the water on an old, had not been used in quite a while, very low pier. And we shouldn't have been there, but we played there all the time. And I leaned forward and I fell in. And when I fell in, I remember my dad told me once, if you're ever in the water, look for something to hold on to and hold on tight until someone can get you. So I go underwater and I saw the leggings of the pier. And so I held on to that under the water.
Oh no.
Yeah, yeah, not terribly wonderful, but I was holding there just waiting, and my brother had the good sense to jump in the water and started pulling at me. But before I let go, I just start seeing these beautiful colors around me. Essentially, I'm drowning, and uh, and it just looks so peaceful and beautiful. And I just kind of then go from these swirling colors to just darkness. And next thing I know, I'm on the side of this whole mill pond. And my brother had we'd watched cartoons a lot. And the cartoon characters, they pull people out of the water and they push. And that's what he did. And so I all of a sudden am aware I'm coughing and sort of looking at him like, what happened? Ever since then, I was even more intuitive and became much more aware of everything around me, the nature, people, pets, animals, just very much able to sort of pick up on what they were thinking. And we thought we were in trouble. So we snuck home. We snuck up the fire escape that was at the back of the house, climbed in, got out of our really wet, terrible clothes from being in a pond, and nobody knew. Nobody knew. I'm sure they wondered, why are these clothes wet? Because we just threw them and buried them in other laundry and ran back outside. I was number 4 out of 5 kids. So, we were all over the place and nobody knew what had happened. But it really attuned me in a whole different way to the unseen world. And it was the beginning of a wild ride.
Wow, wow. Holy cow, what an experience.
Yeah.
Praise the Lord you didn't drown like that. That's good. And that
Yes.
your brother had the wherewithal and good for cartoons. CPR apparently. So go Bugs Bunny or whoever. right? Tom and Jerry, I don't know. But what an experience. And then, yeah, you came out of it and you're like, wow, I see things differently. And
Yes.
but you kind of tried to hide it for a while, right?
Oh, I did. I tried to hide everything. I didn't have the good sense to hide it until about a year later. I was in the car with my sister, and my mother was going to drive all of us from the small town in eastern North Carolina to Chapel Hill. And we're in the car, and my mom has gone inside to pick up something in the store. And we're sitting there, and a song comes on the radio. And when the song comes on, I just start singing with it. And it just, made sense. I like to sing, and I'm singing with the song. And all of a sudden, my sister, who was 5 years older than me, starts looking at me, and her jaw drops down. And all of a sudden, that was the first sign, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. And I looked at her, and she says, "How do you know that song?" I go, "Well, it's on the radio. I've probably heard it before." And she goes, "No, no. How do you know that song?" I go, "I don't know. I heard it before, I guess." And she goes, "It's never been played before. They just said it's a new band." And it was the first time they'd been playing in the States. And of course, you may have heard of them. It was the Beatles.
Yeah, I think I have. Yeah.
So that was when I realized I needed to zip up, because people were, they'd look at me like I was a freak. And going to school in Chapel Hill for elementary school and up through high school, I had the wonderful education in that area, and then I spent summers with my dad near the coast, and so I had the outdoor time and the fun stuff there. But when I was in fifth or sixth grade, I think it was sixth, they sent over the people who were graduate students from Duke University. And that was when they used to have the parapsychology program there. And there was a group of us, they were doing this pod classroom. It was experimental, and all the kids got to work at their own speed. So I kind of hung out with groups where we would compete with each other. So there were about 4 to 6 of us who would see who could finish each of the class modules the quickest. Well, the teachers didn't know what to do with us, because we're halfway through the school year and we finished everything that was required for the school year. So they're throwing things at us, tanagrams, let's give them puzzles to do. And so when the Duke University students from the parapsychology group wanted to come over and say, could we do some sort of games and testing with some of the kids? you know, they were like, sure. So all of a sudden, I'm over there with my best friend and a couple other folks, and they said, we have these cards. We want you to play a card game. And we're like, okay. And they were cards, and they were, unbeknownst to me, they were the psi cards, the PSI cards that have the triangle and the crescent and the circle and the square, where one person looks at it and they just think of the card, and the other person tries to guess what card they've pulled. So I'm thinking this is just a fun game. And they've split us up into pairs, and they paired me with my best friend. So I thought, this is cool. So I'm sitting there looking at her, and she'd look at a card and I'd look at her and I'd say, star. And you could see that students could see what she was doing, the grad students, and they're taking notes. And other kids are kind of finishing up and going. And she'd pull another one, I'd say square, and they'd take notes. And we went like that back and forth. And then we traded, and she'd try and guess what I had and would hit it sometimes. And they said, let's go back and do it the other way. And so they had her pull it again. And I didn't quite notice that all of the grad students were coming and now standing behind her. And so I'm just saying what it is. And all of a sudden they go, can you tell us how it is you know what the card is? And all of a sudden I thought, uh-oh. I'm in trouble again. And I said, well, it's like, it's not me, it's her. When she looks at the card, all I have to do is look at her, and I swear I see it drawn out on her forehead, and I just say it. So it's not me. So, unbeknownst to me again, until I was in graduate school and was finishing up, and already had my first child, and I'm sitting there, and they my parents are chatting and my siblings go, what was the weirdest thing, that happened to us when we were in school? She goes, oh, well, Tracy, I don't know if you knew this, Tracy, but there was someone from Duke University and they were calling and they kept calling me. They sent me a letter. I threw it out. They called me again. And I started yelling at them and I said, I will not let you make my daughter be a freak. And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And she said, they kept calling me wanting to know if I would allow them to have you come for the summer and stay at Duke University so they could do more testing of you and see. And it was the parapsychology department. And she was like, there is no way that you are going to turn my daughter into a freak. And she said no. And I kind of was like, because part of me went, that would have been fun.
No kidding, right? Yeah. Well, and the word freak too, right? Like,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
that's a little harsh. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, I kind of grew up hiding quite a bit because it always seemed like people would be up at arms and suddenly I'd realize, oh no, because you just want to be accepted and be like everyone else, especially as a teen.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. For sure. But at some point in life, okay, so you have a child and
I,
yeah, you have three now, but
yes,
after having your first one, this happened after you already had one when this was happening and you're in grad school. When did you come to grips with, well, it's okay. I am who I am. This is how I operate and this is who I am. And embrace it.
it, I probably after I had done a lot of my scientific training, because a lot of that I went to school for studying cell biology at Georgetown. And while there, we were doing an experiment. And again, this was horrible because it was an experiment where you were supposed to be staining macro these phages or viruses, bacteriophages that would attach to cells. And they had this interesting protein coat around them, so they had a certain shape. And we were supposed to be doing what's called negative staining. And I thought, oh, my intention was we're staining those bacteriophages so that then we can go under a high microscope and take a picture of it. I thought, great, this is great. I set my intention for that. I did it. I saw them. I stained them, took beautiful pictures, turned it in. I get called into the professor's office and they go, is this supposed to be funny? I go, what? What? And they said, is this a joke? Did you take a negative of the negative? Did you get someone to somehow print a negative of the picture? And again, I'm confused. I said, I don't understand. I said, I stained the bacteriophages. They said, I know. You're not supposed to be able to do that. And I was like, what? They said it's a negative stain, so everything should be black around it, and you shouldn't be able to see anything but a clear area. And I had clearly stained it. And she said, you were going to fail. I'm going to fail you
Oh,
unless, that's your option. You either take the fail and admit that this was some trickery you did, or you repeat the experiment and I do it right next to you doing it myself. And I go, that one, let's do that one. But I'm thinking I have to have the same intention, or she's going to say, see, this was all a trick. You're lying. And so here we were doing this side by side. I was terrified, but I said, I've got to be in the same mindset. I'm staining the bacteriophage, and that was what I was doing. We both stained it, same stains, got it from the same place, same material, and did it, got it under the microscope, looked at it, took the picture. Mine stained, hers didn't.
mm,
And she goes, I don't know how you're doing this, but this is weird. So I was terrified of stepping up and being seen in that way. What really turned it around was really after I had finished residency training and had been out, was now practicing psychiatry. And I'm sitting across from a patient who I'd been doing psychotherapy with as well as looking at meds. She had severe trauma. And, we'd gone through times where she had to be hospitalized, and I would commit her at times if need be because she was seriously going to really harm herself. And we finally got to a point where she said, I can't work with you if you keep committing me. And I said, well, I can't work with you if you're not alive. So we have to come up with a happy medium. And so she said, okay, you have to promise not to commit me. I said, then you have to promise to be absolutely honest with me and keep yourself safe. So I'm sitting across from her one day and she won't look me in the eye at all. And I kept saying, how are you doing? And she just kept looking down and she would just say, I'm fine. But she had the saying, and I don't know what it meant to her, but it was F dot, I dot, N dot, E dot, and not fine, like I'm great, I'm good. And I said, well, which one of these is that? And she just wouldn't say. She kept looking down and said, I'm fine. And I'm looking at her, and suddenly I get this absolute vision of her not being alive in her home. And I thought, she is going to go home and hurt herself. So I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, I'm scared. And I'm sitting there trying to think what to do, what to do. And I'm sitting across from her and she goes, oh, look at the time. It's time for me to go. And unlike me, because all my patients would be like, that's not like you, Dr. Latz. I go, I'll say when it's time. I, I'm not the, MD by any means. I don't tell people things like that. So I go, I'll say when we're done. I don't think we're done yet. And I'm thinking what to do. And all of a sudden I hear very clearly next to me, I hear, tell her. And I hear two phrases that make no sense to me and make no sense to anything we've ever talked about. And I'm sitting there thinking, do I tell her this? She's going to wonder where it came from. And then I have to admit, I'm hearing things and I'm your psychiatrist. And I'm like, this could be good. This is a big uh-oh. And, I'm sitting there debating it and I hear much more forcefully tell her, and it was this two phrases again. So I just go, okay. I go, what would you say if I told you? And I say the phrases, and she has been looking down, and all of a sudden she goes, what did you say? I said, what would you say if I told you that? She goes, how do you know that? And I'm like, but before I can go to sheer panic, I go, that's not the important thing. The important thing is it obviously means something to you. Tell me, what does it mean? And she suddenly went from this, sort of glazed over look, she suddenly starts saying, my grandmother, the one who was the only person who kind of knew that not great things were going on, she just picked it up around me. And she would, when I would come over there, say, go get my book and come sit in my lap. And she would rock with her when she was quite young, and she would read to her from a book of poetry. And those two phrases were two lines from her grandmother's favorite poem that I'd never heard of and never knew. So that was when I just sort of was like, whew. And suddenly I said, you've never told me about this grandmother. Tell me. And she just lit up and said, oh, how much she loved that grandmother. The grandmother had passed when she was an early teen. And she just lightened up. And I said, our time's a little over. We were like 45 minutes late. and I said, our time's a little bit over. Are you going to be okay? And she looked at me and she goes, Dr. Latz, I promise you I'll be fine until I come back next week. I said, great. She left. And that was where I went, what was that? What was that? And I knew I needed to go back and reawaken the gifts that I'd kind of tried to hide and put away. And so I did. That's when I started training at an ancient mystery school, kind of still seeing my patients, still raising my kids, but I would go for a week or two to the different courses. And that put me on the path of really bringing that magic back into medicine, bringing the connection to spirit to help people understand who they truly were. And I'll never forget calling there when I'd kind of thought, okay, I'm gonna find out what this place is like. And when I called, I said, I'm interested in spiritual anatomy. That felt like what I needed to know because I was a physician and I was a biologist, blah, blah. And they go, that's good. What's your name? And I told them my name, Tracy Latz. And they said, you've never been here before, have you? I go, no, sir, but that's what I'm interested in. They go, okay. Well, in-depth channeling is August. And I go, excuse me? I said, I wanted that class, the spiritual anatomy. He goes, yes, ma'am. Uh, in-depth channeling will be, and I finally said, I don't think you understand. And he goes, ma'am, I don't think you understand. What you're wanting to take is one of the very last courses in the metaphysician or metaphysical doctorate program. And everything else before that is a prerequisite. And I go, in-depth channeling, what's that? They go, well, it's mediumship 101. And I was like, oh. So that was the beginning of a journey that kind of reawakened my curiosity about what and who we really are, because we're so much bigger than this physical body. And when you look at the physical body, the etheric body or chi life force body, and then you look at the emotional field and the thought field, and then the spiritual aspect of us, which is so much bigger than any of us know. And when we can learn how to settle down and get into our heart and expand our heart, we are directly connected with who we truly are. And that's why, we can often say the most perfect, wonderful things that are needed to be said when the people around us who we love, are in trouble and we're kind of like, we're not, we just, our heart goes out to them, which means we expand our heart center and we just become wise because we then become this channel directly to not only our soul, but because who we are, we're all connected. When we are in our soul connection, then we automatically connect with everyone else, which is why when you can lift up into that and be in your heart, you can get intuitive hits, not just psychic, oh, I think I'm picking up this in the thought field, but really connect with another person's soul to help them hear their soul, because so many people are in fear or in pain of different sorts. And when they are, it's hard for them to get into that heart space to hear their own self. It's like when people lose loved ones, and I'll often say, do you feel that they're around you? And they'll kind of stop, and some of them will be like, you mean like a ghost? And I'll be, well, do you feel them around? And they'll go, well, you know what? Interesting you say that, because I had an experience and I didn't want to tell anyone about it, where I felt this. And I said, yeah, or even a pet, a loved one that's a pet that has passed. And people will suddenly say, I could have sworn I felt like they were there. I was starting to drift off. And if it was a cat or a small dog that would leap up onto the bed, typically, but they were no longer around, they would be starting to drift off and then sort of be like, that felt like someone just boop, boop, popped up on
Uh-huh.
the bed, and you can almost feel them coming up. And it's because, this veil between this physicality, it's not way up there, it's right here. And when you get out of your own way, and just get more into your heart, you become more playful. You have much more ability to really connect with your own extra senses, to read those psy cards.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, I'll tell you, I love you, of course, but I love what you're talking about because and I believe in God. And so, people will sometimes refer to the universe or spirit or whatever. I believe in God. I believe in a creator. I believe,
Yes.
whatever. And yeah, and so I've had a couple guests on lately that have talked about hearing from God. And
Yeah.
and uh we can be so caught up in ourselves that we just have these one-way conversations, right? We sit down and we pray, we meditate and pray, right? And
Yes.
and then don't stop and listen for an answer, or or even try. And I just think God is really cool. And
It's very cool.
yeah, and I think that two-way conversation is absolutely possible. And it doesn't mean some booming voice, I am God and I am here, whatever. But things that you can feel in your gut or sense in your heart, right? Or you
Yes.
just intuition. They talk about women's intuition, right? Like
Yes.
all of a sudden you're thinking about your daughter and you're like, oh my gosh, but something happened, something happened. And then later you get a phone call, find out that just then there was a car accident. I mean, well, how do you know that? Well, that knowing isn't just for that one time. That knowing is something that you can be more in tune to.
Yes.
And then I love that you said they have so much more of a joyful life because it's just the truth. Because it's getting away from taking this physical life too seriously.
Absolutely. And
Right.
there is that saying, make a joyful noise unto the Lord, it
Uh-huh.
because
Right.
it really is when we and come to me as a child, because when we come as a child, we're not having all that naysaying, the old tapes of you can't do this, you're unlovable, you're too heartbroken, you're, blah, 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 all the stuff that we tell ourselves. And in a child, we're not limited by anything. And our child, that our inner child, is our emotional one. It's the one that is the power behind everything we create. And when we go to fear, we create or only see the scary stuff. And so when we begin to challenge those old beliefs, we can now learn how to reawaken the child and nurture it within ourselves and calm down the inner adult, the overthinking one, the one that's like, this child is too, they're going to get us in trouble. And that was my issue, back, the inner adult was like, you got to get a little of this child, we're going to get kicked out of
Right.
graduate school. The child came out and suddenly painted the bacteriophage. Uh, but that's where things do become magical. And when you do get into your heart, you really can have that conversation with your own soul, with others, with God, source, universe, with people, angelic beings, or whatever you understand that to be. you know uh it's it's fascinating, and that's a great joy. A lot of times people will say, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know about this mediumship stuff. I don't know how to quiet the mind enough to do that. So that's why I started, in part of my training through the Ancient Mystery School, we learned how to do intuitive art, which bypasses it, and it's just fun, and even kids can do it. So it makes it really joyful. What you do is you help someone begin to get out of their way, where they focus first on the frustration, the anger, the fear of whatever happened that day. I got into an argument, and someone cut me off in traffic, and you let them feel those things, but not dwell on it. What you do is let it bubble up and then come out with eyes closed, with a little what's called a mind fold, or you can put a bandana and make it like a blindfold, so they can't see what they're doing. And they use these pastel chalks to just let the energy of it, when they're angry, it's going like this, and they have no idea what color chalk they're grabbing, and they have no idea what's actually coming out on the paper. But they can feel when it's flowing, and they can feel when it's done. Oh, I think I let it all out. Great. Now take that off and wash your hands and let's see what's on the paper. And, I've had people come in really, really angry. And then when they go wash their hands, they come back, you'll see someone in the picture with a weapon, or somebody yelling at somebody, or a scary face. And you let them just bubble up all the fear-based emotions, which is, guilt, shame, anger, abandonment, heartbreak, those kind of things, so that they just bubble up. And we do that fairly quickly. And then you even let them tap into, let's go back to childhood. Is there something that you don't want to talk about, maybe, but you feel, let's get that out. This is your chance. And you let them just get it out. And then now they're ready to be a little bit more clear. I call it being a clear pipette. I'm a biologist. So it's not all gunky with all of the stuck fear-based stuff in there. And so once that pipette becomes clear, now they can truly become a clear channel or a clear venue to lift and connect to their own higher self and that which is higher than that. So what we do then is we have them close their eyes, take them through a meditation where they lift up and they see their higher self. And they can ask, and it's not like, I can't hear it, Dr. Latz. You don't have to. Do you feel or sense something's there? Yeah. Do you sense that they're interacting with you? Ask them, what's the most important thing for me to know right now? And then just stop. You may hear something, but don't dwell on that. You may see something, don't dwell on that. Feel the energy of it, you know because we change things when we start putting words. And so when you feel it, now eyes still closed, they're grabbing chalks, they have no idea, and the energy comes out in different colors on the paper. And that's fascinating because then you'll see there'll be messages for them. But the beauty of it, because it's not done by them or their mind, it will shift because of the layering of the pastel chalks that are on there. It will literally change over time to keep answering whatever the question was. So you can connect with God and ask, what's the most important thing I need to know right now to step fully into my gifts? Or, what do you want me most to know? I tend to tell people, don't ask a yes or no question because, should I buy this house? Yes, no. It's like,
Right, right.
uh, but it will show you a lot. And I've had some people who've asked, what do I need to know about this health issue going on? Or what's the most important thing for me to know in this relationship? Or when they miss a pet that may have passed or a family member that may have passed, to picture them as if they were in front of them or get a picture out with a good view of their eyes. And you can connect with another person by looking deeply into the eyes or looking at a photograph of them looking deeply into the eyes. And you can feel that connection. Once you feel it, now you close the eyes and you lift higher and you ask whatever it is you want to ask and you see what comes out. And I love that because then people don't have to go to other people and say, can you tell me what they think? Because when you go to people who are channeling, they connect, they get information, and they interpret what they're told or the symbols they see and they put it into words. So now I'm telling you words, and the words to you may mean a little something a little bit different. So you interpret it this way. What I like about this is it's coming directly through the energy, no words, it's movement and color, but things come out of it that can be, I've been shocked where suddenly a perfect face will come out. You're like, well, hello, where did you come from? And it just lets your inner child, that wonder and joy and sort of magic, what's going to happen today, will just kind of flow out on the paper. And we use all of these tools, not just meditative tools and tapping tools and all sorts of things to get through to people, looking at sound, looking at color, looking at vibrations, sense, it's coming at whatever resonates with a person to help them remember who they are or to remove the blocks that keep their inner child and inner adult from interacting in a loving way so that they can calm here and connect. And that to me, I love that. There's nothing like seeing that, and there's nothing like becoming useless when they get it and they're like, I don't need to ask any more questions. I feel connected, I feel healthier, I feel more vital, I feel more connected to God's source universe, whatever avatar being or universal energy that people are connected with. I'm like, I love it. I love it.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, that's so cool. And I love the way you broke it down that because yeah, it's not just what we think about ourselves, but it's also things that people have said to us about us, right?
Yes.
And it's also what's fed into us by media. And it's also, like any outside source, right? Or comparing yourself to somebody else or whatever it is. And I always think, man, we are all unique and individual. There's nobody that has ever been like us. Nobody will ever be like you, right? You're one of a kind masterpiece. There's nobody else like you. And you see some people that are unfortunately kind of beat down,
Yes.
that they kind of brought in those words that people said about them or they say about themselves. And it's stifling. You
It
can only
really
go so
is.
far. Yeah, yeah. To
And it,
release that, to see that released. Ooh.
yes, it fuels those, what I say, the lies we tell ourselves that we buy into. If someone was, excuse me, if someone was traumatized and while that was happening, they were told you deserve this or, you were bad, all the things that a child, all they want is to be unconditionally loved and accepted by whatever the caregivers are around them and to be good. I want to be good. Because kids think magically that if everyone's happy around me, I had something to do with it. If everyone's not happy, I had something to do with it. And, they take that on. And if they are not nurtured and allowed to realize, no, honey, this person's upset because of something that has nothing to do with you. If you're being told instead, that's right, don't you? You made this person mad and you did this, then kids begin to start overthinking and locking themselves away. And when they go to fear, they guard their heart. And when you begin to guard your heart, it would take a love bomb to get you to feel love from someone, even if someone is trying to nurture you. There becomes a point where if I've locked it off enough, I can't feel that. And I feel more and more alone. And we're in a time where a lot of people are in fear and a lot of people are feeling very lonely, even though they're like, I have a million friends on Facebook, but they feel very alone.
Yeah, I read a statistic recently that over 50% of Americans suffer from extreme loneliness, not just loneliness, but extreme loneliness. And opening yourself up, figuring out who you are, figuring out that you're so much more than you think you are, taking that bottle cap off and just exploding and being fully, completely, truly you. uh, I would think it would change everything in your life. It would change how much joy you have, like we already said, but it would change how you perceive the people around you, right? And
Yes.
every relationship in your life.
Yes, it changes the people that you attract. It changes physical issues. I had one woman who came and went to a weekend seminar where we were going over all of these concepts and carrying people through tools and exercises. And you could see her, she kind of started getting it. When I met her, she had been one of those DES babies when she was born, where she was missing ends of some digits and was born with dislocated hips, so had lots of surgeries and was walking with two canes that kind of came up and wrapped around here. And that's how I met her. And I saw her a month after the class. She came in to see me, and she didn't have those special canes. She had one cane. And she goes, I'm walking better, aren't I? I said, yeah, you are. She goes, yeah, I'm working on some stuff. I said, okay. And she came back 2 months later and she was walking. She came walking in. She had a limp, but she had no cane. And I said, what are you doing? She goes, I'm using everything that you taught. I'm using everything and I'm communicating, I'm connecting. And because at that point, she knows how to connect to her own higher self and go to what is like the temple of wisdom to ask whatever question of her own soul that she needed and then have a place to create once she understood the big picture. The next time I saw her, she came in, she wasn't limping. She goes, I don't think I need to come see you anymore. I said, that's great. I said, tell me what's going on. She goes, well, I'm taking a class. And she's grinning real big. So I'm like, she's wanting me to ask. I go, what do you mean? What kind of class? She goes, I'm taking a kickboxing class. And
Oh
I just
my
went,
God. Oh,
you
that's
know,
so fantastic. Oh, wow.
you
Oh,
know,
good for
it
her.
is it's so much fun. A lot of people will come. For a long time I worked with a lot of women with PTSD, and we ended up going to Lebanon We were asked to go to Lebanon to work with a group of women who had grown up as kids through wartime and would go to school. And they were of various, Jewish, Christian, Muslim, different women. And they had all gone to school together, but they had gotten used to going to school and then have bombings in the night and then going to school the next day. And suddenly a couple of the kids weren't there and they were never there again, and so they kind of grew up with all this trauma and they just had stuffed it. But they said, could you come and teach that weekend seminar where you kind of let go of a lot of things? But they also said, then could we do, we're curious about that intuitive art stuff. And we were like, okay, let's figure out how to do this. Yeah, let's do it. And so we did the intensive sort of seminar, and you could see them just, go from being very restricted and kind of in their head about it to suddenly softening up and joking more and being more playful in the class. And then we were doing the intuitive art, and they, usually you start out and it's kind of like very controlled, but because they had done all of this work for the 2 days before, they're free. And these things that were coming out, they looked like they were on fire with joy and they just had a great time. And that's the sort of thing I love to see. I feel like that's part of my service here, is to help people understand who they are, and then once they understand it, let them live their life. And I love that. There's nothing like seeing the light come back to their eyes and the vitality, and things change around, from health issues that suddenly shift in different ways to relationships where they come in and they're saying this is done, and suddenly they shift and they see it differently, and they don't come in biting the hook, and they're not in their reactive self. uh, People who were questioning, is there really something bigger than me? And by the end of the weekend, they go, I know that there is, and it's not like what people told me, but now I know it. Before it was like people were telling me and I was trying to just go on faith of it. And now I've experienced it. And, you go, I'm done.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. That's so cool. Yeah. How many people, what percentage of people do you think really tap into themselves, really are fully who they are? Do you have any guesses on that?
Ooh, it's interesting. I think it used to be, and this is curious, it used to be that there weren't that many. Everyone was just sort of growing up and doing, and kids who were more intuitive were sort of shutting down and kind of not wanting to be weird. You want to be like your peers. uh, and then a lot of people wouldn't open back up until sometimes when they were in their 40s or 50s. And there's a reason why a lot of the high spiritual teachings used to be, we're not even going to teach you that until you're 40 or 50, because you're not done with the red knighting in the world and the succeeding and figuring out who you are and setting up a relationship and see if you're going to start a family and then center yourself. And now I'm ready to step out of the yang, the doing in the world, to more the yin, the unseen, the metaphysical, spiritual, more feminine in a way. Doesn't mean it's a woman, but the feminine energy that's internal. And then people really tend to be more seeking, and that's how it used to be. And I think shortly before pandemic, a lot of people were saying, oh, the crystal children are coming in, all of these things. It's kind of like, I don't know, what is that? There really seemed to be this younger age that began to come in. And then I think a lot of people, the only thing that might have been good about the whole chaos of pandemic was it really made people, it put it in their face, what is all of this about? What is this earth school we're in? Is it really, I'm just kind of here, I'd have my heyday, yay, and then I get older and then I check out. Uh, I think a lot more people started really kind of looking more internally, and if I get through this pandemic, what do I want my life to look like? Do I want it to be more fulfilling? And so I think people were kind of diving deeper. Now, some people were diving deeper into anxiety and depression, and there's, we have a lot of self-injurious things that are at their highest rate right now. And part of that is the people who are so lonely, who didn't find when they began to dive deep, they dove deep but got deeper into the lies or the faulty thoughts that they were telling themselves and comparing themselves on a lot of social media. I think of, well, my life isn't that one, or look at them. Um, so people became more critical. So that internal adult was sort of beating up the inner child more. I think if people understand the tools and just try them, then they can learn to get into their heart. And suddenly it's kind of like, I didn't believe you, but I did get to the point where I believed that you believed it. And because of that, I'm willing to kind of say, okay, let me have a look at this for a little bit. Now, when people do that, I see younger people have an interest into really discovering more of who they are. And it's almost younger people to a degree, almost more than the older people right now. It's a complete flip. So it's kind of neat to see, my daughter who's 31, she's my eldest, she had her friends come over, and she has this wonderful group of friends, and they're very highly eclectic. And they came and they wanted to know, could they hang out at my house? I'm like, fine, I'll get out of your hair. And they were like, no, come in and do it with us. And then all of a sudden they got to talking, and my daughter comes in and they go, Mom, I have something to ask you. I go, what? They want to know if you would show them how to do that art stuff. And I go, really? They want to know how to do that? And they, yeah. So I go, okay, guys, really, show of hands. So they're all like, yeah. And so we go through and we do it. And a lot of it, they had never done anything like this before. And suddenly, these very controlled sort of people that are kind of questioning a lot of things during the pandemic, you could just see tears flowing. I go, are you okay? And they go, yes, I just, understood something, and it's here in the artwork, and it's beautiful. And you would have them do artwork for each other so they wouldn't question, did that come out because subconsciously I knew if I did this that it would show that. So when one of their friends would come up with it, it was like, wow. So I think there is a craving for people to know. And I think people get to this point where their higher self is like, hello, kind of like, really, I am waiting for you to give me the opening to connect with you. And, having that little bit of opening can be the game changer, for
Mm.
people to get out of depths of depression, get out of anxiety, get out of being so self-consumed and self-judging, and soften, which changes relationships with their own friends, their own spouses, significant others, their own children. And, that's really cool, and kids like to, I want to connect with my dog. Okay.
Oh, that's so cool. It's so cool to think about. Years ago, I had a friend who came across this woman who was a missionary somewhere in Africa. I don't remember where. And she was trying to tell people, oh gosh, there's a God, and, trying to win souls, right?
Yeah.
And but nothing was happening. Nothing was changing in this village. And then this man came to visit, and he was a traveling evangelist, and the whole, like, everybody changed. And like the guy that was the worst guy that everybody couldn't stand, like, was afraid of in the village, he came out of the tent like this changed person, right? This just changed person, all of a sudden just recognizing that there's so much more to life than just this, right? And so she went to him and she said, well, what did you do? Like how is that different? And he said, well, I just listen. I listen. And
Yes.
and he told her, I pray, but then I shut up and I just listen. And then that's the only difference. So she decided she was going to try this thing. She went home and she prayed, and then she stopped. She just listened. And she said, God told her to bring this woman who'd been working for her, who was living in the village, been working for her, but they were at odds all the time. They were fighting, fighting, fighting all the time. And they just couldn't come to terms with each other. And she didn't know what to do about her. But so she felt like God said to bring her an egg. And she's like, bring her an egg. Oh my gosh, I'd be so embarrassed to bring her an egg. Like, really? And where am I going to get an egg? A chicken flew into her sort of open air hut and laid an egg. And she's like, okay, there's the egg. So she took the egg to this woman, and she didn't want to bring it to the door and give it to her. So she was so happy. One of her kids was outside playing, gave the egg, and she's like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? Well, the next day, this woman comes to work, and she has a whole different attitude. And she said, why did you bring me that egg? And she said, because God told me to, like she was so hesitant, like, what do I say? And the woman told her that that day she had enough food to feed her kids and absolutely nothing for herself. And that egg filled her, totally sustained her. Like it was exactly what she needed. And it's like, oh wow, this is so cool. Yeah, anyway, and so then she started listening. And so it's so cool to know that God is that cool, because I just know that God is that cool, that we're not just alone in this, floating along, hoping to get through life, hoping to make the right decisions. Like we get help,
All the
we're
time.
not alone, we get help. And so to tap into the help, tap into who we are, recognize who we are and embrace it. And then tap into some help. Who doesn't want some help?
That's right. And you can call it in all the time. We don't drive up to McDonald's or your fast food of choice and sit there at the drive-through and, they go, what would you like? You don't go, I don't want this and I don't want that. You actually open up and you say, I would like assistance. I would like this. I would like that. But it's not like, give it to me, give it to me. You just open up to receive. And when you get it, like I will teach people about, a Qigong practice really of calling in a ball of light from God's source universe, a ball of light swirling. I see it as this beautiful gold and white light, bigger around than you are wide. And it just sort of comes through and moves through your body, this huge ball. And as it moves, it'll pause at times and you'll feel things shift. And then it will just keep going and move all the way through and all the way out and then spin off. And when I had two different health issues, actually three when I broke my arm a couple of years ago, but several years ago when I was 40, I'm now 63, I had a left breast issue that showed up out of the blue, normal, 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 all of a sudden multiple calcifications. And they were like, we don't know what to do. We probably to biopsy them, it'd be so disfiguring. We probably ought to take the breast. And I just kind of was like, I have to think about this. And I went home and put the kids, they were young then, put them down to bed and then lay there and everyone else was asleep and just tears. I thought, oh my goodness, I want to be there when my kids graduate. But I just heard, when I got very calm suddenly, I heard very clearly, do something different. And so I knew I'd had enough metaphysical training to know that left breast issue was high heart and it was about balancing love and compassion. And I'd always had incredible compassion for others, but was not as good at allowing my own self-compassion for me or opening myself up and asking for assistance. So this was my lesson. I needed to either get this or not. And so I thought, okay, I knew what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to wait, give me some time. And they were all scared. And I said, give me 6 weeks. And it could be terrible. I said, I get it. I'm not going to come after you. And I called in this ball of light. This is where it first sort of came to me. And I was doing that. And I was doing other self-nurturing things. What I didn't do was ask my spiritual friends who wouldn't go to, oh my God, you poor thing, but who would also understand how glorious and wondrous the universe is and that God is, that you can call upon this and receive. And and be open to it. If you're not like, I got to direct this and do it. No, you just call it in and now allow. And so 6 weeks later, I'm driving for the next diagnostic mammogram. And I thought, ooh, maybe I should have reached out to my friends. I hadn't. And I thought, oh, I should have done that. And I heard that old script from childhood go, I'd rather die than ask for help. And I went, I thought, oh my goodness, I need to reach out to my friends. So they do the mammogram, and I feel like things are okay, but they do the mammogram and they meet and they go, well, it's interesting. It's not worse, but it's not better. And so my husband at the time was like, oh, that's it. Take them both off. I said, hold on. I want 6 more weeks. And my husband was furious. And my OB said, it wasn't worse. I'm willing to do this. And I said, okay, if in another 6 weeks, if it's still like this, let's, call the surgeons, let's do it. And so I did the whole practice that I'd done before, but what I did differently, as soon as I walked out of that office, I reached out to every single one of my spiritual friends and said, I am willing to receive prayer, receive love and light from afar. If you want me to come to you and have a process done, or you want to come to me, I'm all about it, and I'll continue doing what I do. I went back 6 weeks later, they repeated it. The guy comes in and he goes, I don't know how to tell you this. And I go, that's okay, you don't have to. He goes, no, you don't understand. I said, that's okay, you don't have to. He goes, I haven't even told you. I said, go, that's okay. And he goes, hold on. He goes, these were all your normal mammograms. Here were the last two with this horrible stuff going on in your left breast, never there before. And now here it is now. It's clear, just like it was. I said, I know. He goes, I can't tell you why. I go, that's okay. You don't have to.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
you
Wow.
know, so calling in and just trusting when you do that, but not being in fear, and just calling it in with just that childlike wonder and love and being in compassion, it changes everything. And yes, you will hear, and different people will hear. Some people are clairaudient and they'll hear things in this spiritual realm. Everyone's like, spirit, it's way up there. I go, no, it's right here. It's actually right here. So let's just kind of stick right here. And you may hear it, you may see it, like see a vision or an image. You may have a sudden gut feeling, a clear sentience where you clear feeling, you feel it, that knowing, or doing something like intuitive art or automatic writing, even for some folks, where with eyes closed, they just ask a question or feel connected and they do it. You will get answers if you can sort of calm all of this naysaying and just get into your heart. And it's a wonderful journey. I mean, it really becomes magical.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and the thing is too, is it draws you closer to God. Like
Yes.
then you have more. It's like you have more. Even it was always there. Anything you wanted was always there. But to tap in, it's like you feel like you're getting more and more and
Yeah.
more,
Yeah.
and so to chase God in that way is just amazing. And
Yes.
yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, this has been so great. You are so
Oh.
cool. I love what you do. I love your heart. I love your heart for people. I love that you're not like, I've got this gift and I'm keeping it to
No.
myself. You're like, no, this is for everybody, anybody,
Yeah.
anywhere. And you want to be in a different spiritual place. You want to get closer to yourself and to God. This is the way, this is how it happens. And it's for anybody. I love it. Love it. Love it. I love what you do. You're helping so many
Uh,
people. How can people get in touch with you? How can they dive in with you?
oh, we have a website. It's a little almost too eclectic. People are like, there's so much there. Shiftyourlife.com. We have a YouTube channel, Shift Your Life TV channel. And, we have different free gifts that we give away from time to time. We have a newsletter. You don't have to worry about being spammed and scammed because I have to write it. And guess what? You're lucky if you get a newsletter every, 1 to 3 months. It's not like the every week stuff you get from some folks. But we are here to serve and we love to help. And, it's wonderful and you're wonderful. And thank you for what you do, Kim, because you touch so many people and connect them with all sorts of tools and people and instruments and pathways. And I appreciate that very much.
Well, thanks. That's so sweet. And you have so much more that I'm telling you, everybody, go to the YouTube channel and watch some videos. I mean, there's stuff on tapping and on ways to anti-stress. If you got a college student, my granddaughter's going to college this next fall, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Cordelia, you got to learn this stuff because it's going to help you so much with college anxiety and test anxiety, right? And whatever. But anyway, I so appreciate you. Thank you again for being
Thank you.
here. And yes. And thank you all for joining me. Pass this episode along. Let other people hear it, bless other people with it. And I just pray that until we see each other again, that you keep your heart open and you live your love loud.